If you grew up in an environment where you couldn't trust the adults to parent you, you couldn't trust the adults that were placed in your life to guide you, you couldn't trust the atmosphere, was it safe? It didn't feel safe. Well, as a response, not the actual toxic environment, if this is your story, of course, not the toxic environment, but your response as, you know what? I'm going to make sure that there is never any instability in my life. Sis, that's trauma.
Here we grow again, our hearts on the mend. What I want is what I want, soft spaces.
Welcome to Softspaces Podcast, where you get a little bit of me and I connect with a little bit of you, and together we create a community of wellness that lives unmuted, authentically in every area of life. My name's Yolanda Lewis, and I am your host. Today, we're going to talk about what trauma really looks like how it plays out in real time. We use the word a lot. In today's culture, the word is used a lot, trauma. And I look at it as a really good thing because it means that people are ready. The community of people, of us, humans, are ready to explore what blocks us, what stops us, what gets in the way of us being able to tap into and live our best life in every area. I love all the talk about trauma. However, I want to slow things down so that you can really understand what trauma is, so you can actually identify where it is in your life, where it may be in someone else's life, so they can start working on it. That's where healing begins, when we can understand and define what is and what is not part of the fabric of what makes you and me shine so brightly on this planet. So, one of the ways that trauma shows up in our lives where we don't recognize it is in how we deal. So, I'm going to tell you right now, take off the cape. You don't need it. No one even asked you to put it on. And that cape could be a sign of trauma that you're holding on to. Let me give you an example. One of my favorite definitions of trauma is by Dr. Gabriel Maté, and he defines trauma as not what happened to you, not the actual event, but how you respond to what happened to you, how you respond to the event. For example, if you grew up in an atmosphere, in an environment where you couldn't trust the adults to parent you, you couldn't trust the adults that were placed in your life to guide you, you couldn't trust the atmosphere, was it safe? It didn't feel safe. Well, as a response, not the actual toxic environment, if this is your story, of course, not the toxic environment, but your response as, you know what? I'm going to make sure that there is never any instability in my life. Sis, that's trauma. Here I go, putting on the cape, and I'm in everybody's business because I'm the one that can fix it. I'm the one that can see clearly. I'm the one that knows because I live with. I'm the one who knows how to take care of it. I can't trust anyone else. I only trust me. Sis, that's trauma. That's how it plays out in real time. Oftentimes we identify trauma as, I wasn't abused, so I don't have trauma. I didn't do drugs, right? I wasn't strung out on drugs, or I wasn't overtaken by alcohol, so I don't have trauma. That's not what defines trauma. So I want you to understand very clearly that is one of the ways that we can miss trauma peeking its head in our life, right? Our body and our mind and our spirit is trying to tell us, hey, we're a little bit fragmented over here. We're a little bit disconnected over here. And we need to remember, put it back together, remember, reconnect with our unmuted self. So that same individual that said, I am the only one I can trust in my world because my environment that I grew up in was so toxic, the story I decided to tell myself to keep myself safe was that I am the only one that can fix everything. And not just in my life, I can fix it in anybody's life. So I'm going to always make myself available to help everybody else because I'm the one that can fix it. And the confusion comes because we want to say that there's a part of that that's a good thing. That's what makes any lie believable, because part of it could be true. And the part that could be true is that because you lived through the experiences that you had to endure, whatever they were, you gained some wisdom from that. You know how things could be better. You learned, even just from observation, how to show up differently for others. You learned that. Where it becomes toxic, where the line gets imbalanced, is when we start saying things. This is one of the things I always say is that your spirit will always tell on itself. Your spirit can't lie to itself. It is always truth. It is always truthful. It is always who you really are. And I'm not talking about the rash comments that you made as a comeback to somebody saying something. I'm not talking about that. That's called unfiltered. And a lot of times it's an excuse for unhealed behavior. So I'm not talking about that. I am referring to the you that is healthy, that is wise, that is a light shining so bright in this world, in your world, and everywhere you go. I'm talking about that spirit, the you, real you, unmuted. It can never lie. So it knows when it's not being truthful. And if you're truthful, then you can honestly evaluate the story you have been telling yourself. The story that is truly toxic. The story that needs and wants and craves and desires healing. It desires to remember the truth. That's one of the ways that unhealed spaces show up in our life, that we need to create soft spaces that we can process trauma in. Soft spaces that we can be vulnerable in, that we can say, I actually don't want to do it all. It's exhausting. Matter of fact, I'm tired of doing it all. Matter of fact, I don't want to do it all. I actually wouldn't mind if I was able to just take a break. I'll give you an example. I cook every night for my husband, except 2 days of the week. There's 2 days I want off. OFF. I don't want to do it. It's your turn. Now, while I don't want to cook all 7 days of the week, I love cooking for my husband, for my family. I love it. I love it. Oh, I love it. I love preparing the meals. I love going to the grocery store. I love or having the groceries delivered, right? I love those things. However, I need a break. And that is the story that is okay to tell. The second way I want you to be aware of how trauma shows up in our daily lives is in our body. Sometimes before our mind can actually understand what's happening, our body will send us signals, send us warnings. So let me give you an example. A few years ago, I got COVID, and from the COVID, I ended up having a couple of blood clots. I ended up with also severe anemia that led to the finding of fibroids. And I had fibroids so bad that they made my tummy as big as if I was like 4 months pregnant. Literally, I was out 21 inches or whatever it is, but I looked like 4 months pregnant. And all the while, because I was used to trauma showing up in one particular way, in the way that I had dealt with it, experiencing sexual trauma as a child, and then unpacking all of the layers that come with finding some type of healing in that. Along that journey, I was only used to dealing with what I was dealing with. I had no understanding of the fact that trauma could show up in my life in another way and actually manifest in my body. So I'm practicing all the things that I understood and did all the things, but when I got to the hospital, I was literally out of breath, literally losing my breath. Literally, my body was screaming for air. And I ended up having to have a major surgery to remove the fibroids and other organs. It was severely traumatic. Once I experienced that, I started digging deep on how in the world did I get fibroids. I didn't even notice how they were growing. 4 months pregnant, I thought I was just getting fat. I had symptoms. I just wasn't used to paying attention to my body. I wasn't used to connecting to my body. I was so focused on making sure my mind was sane, making sure that I'm making the right choices so that my trauma doesn't spill over into how I am a mother and how I show up as a wife. The external piece of relationships, I was only focused on making sure those outward areas were healed enough to present myself in an honest way, totally and completely neglecting the connection to my body. I was praying, I even fasted. I thought I was just getting fat. It got to the point when I look back like, wow, I was sleeping on my side like I was pregnant. And so I started doing all kinds of research, and there is research out there, if you look for it, that supports the connection between body and emotional intelligence, and how we process that in a healing space, and what happens to the body, what the body actually manifests when we don't allow those emotions to flow through us, to pass through us. When we don't allow that, I believe very strongly things can grow inside of us. And for me, it was fibroids. Another way, maybe it's spiritual. Your weight gain, maybe it's a spiritual thing where you have a weakness in a spiritual area that is allowing you to tap into a spirit of gluttony and a spirit of laziness and slothfulness that you didn't really recognize. Look, I'm raising my hand for those who can't see me. I'm telling on myself because this is a soft space. We're all here to support each other. And so in this soft space, I will share with you, that is one of the ways that I realized my weight gain was not just physical. It was not just external. It had to do with spirituality for me. And so as you're watching this podcast, you're going to see me drop and shrink and change sizes. And for those who are only listening, you won't hear anything different because my voice is not going to change, but my body will. So when we meet at an unmute event, or you decide to watch this podcast in addition to listening, you'll be able to see me look a little bit different. The other way that I want to highlight for you of how trauma shows up in our everyday life is through breathing. So if you are a person that shoulders are up because you're always tense and you take short, shallow breaths, you might not even recognize. Matter of fact, let's do this. I want you to pause for a moment. If you're driving, don't close your eyes. If you're, doing things that will cause danger to you if you shift into space, don't do it. Be smart, be wise, and stay unmuted. But don't do those things that are going to cause you harm. However, I want you to think about where you are right now. Right in this minute, where you are, I want you to notice your breath. How are you breathing right now in this moment? How are you breathing? How are you taking breaths? Are you taking full breaths? Are you using the capacity of your lungs? Or do you find yourself taking shorter breaths and not using your diaphragm? If you find yourself on the side of shorter, shallow breaths, this could be a form of trauma, your body's way to try to tell you, hey, raising the white flag here, help, help. That's our body's way to say, help, help. Help me to relieve this trauma. You can simply do it by breathing. Simply. That being said, let's shift into the last part of our podcast where we do a breath work experience. As we reflect on this episode and the ways that trauma can show up in our everyday life, as we're defining trauma as the thing of, not the thing that's happening to us, but how we're responding to the thing happening to us. As we define trauma in that way and notice it in all of our lives and notice how we're breathing, I want to leave you with this technique. So we're going to just do 2 breaths in, 2 exhales. And when we exhale, I want you to totally exhaust the breath. Sometimes that might mean you make a noise. That's okay. If you find yourself wanting to do more breaths even after the episode ends, please do so. And please breathe deeply all the way with your belly. When you breathe in, take it all in, fill your lungs. Feel your lungs being full. Like really stretch them. When you've taken that deep breath, take one more deep breath before you let it all out, okay? Together as a community, we're going to unmute ourselves by breathing 2 times and letting it go. Are you ready? Join us. Deep breath in. Exhale. And again, deep breath in. One more breath. And exhale. How does that feel? Does it feel good? It needs to feel good. Do it until it feels good, until your shoulders come back down. In the meantime, stay unmuted, take care, and God bless.